So welcome, everybody. I am super glad to have you here for the February 2023 edition of the Scrum Professionals Meetup. And tonight, it is my distinct honor and pleasure and joy to welcome We Win to the group. And we and I were talking, we realized that we probably first got to know each other 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more than 10 years ago, when I did a workshop at Dolby. And then subsequently, at a later date, we came out and did one of our certified workshops back when we were in Redwood City. A bunch of you remember the Seaport Center in Redwood City. Fond memories. So, I love the way Lee describes himself here. He's a spirited, multidimensional agile coach. He's been in the industry for over 20 years. I love that. And we works to help organizations realize the power of agile to deliver business value through clear intention and purpose. Love it, love it, love it, love it. It's perpetually pursuing better ways of working through various forms of agility, enterprise level, business, team level, product coaching, training, facilitation. He holds a master's in computer science from CSU Fresno, and is currently an expert agile coach at Delta Dental. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Wee. Welcome. I am thrilled that you are here.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks for the warm welcome from everybody. It's my distinct pleasure to be speaking to this particular group because I mean I owe a debt to Chris too, for getting me started as a Scrum Master, and then and sharing his wisdom at that time, and for me to build up upon that experience and come back and share it with a lot of you. And this, as I said in my LinkedIn post this week, this is one of my favorite topics because I'm all about embodiment. That's the key thing. So when we talk about multidimensional, it's more than just practices and frameworks. There's something that is blood and flesh that's involved in all that consists of who we are as people, right? And conflict is a fascinating topic. Many of us are, hopefully by now you have heard of the words psychological safety. And I'd like to ask, what does that mean to you? And in the prompt that they gave, what were some of the answers? Feel free to throw it in the chat or come off camera and just shout it out. I wanted this to be a dialogue. And also, like, throughout this presentation tonight, there's going to be a lot of info here, right? So feel free to take notes. We're recording this. Jump in, ask me questions, and it should be clear, right? So yes, conflict. So I see Farah. Yes, conflict makes us anxious. What else, guys? Give me some more answers.
No, sometimes it can be healthy.
It can be healthy. It could be healthy not being psychologically safe. Is that what you're talking about? Or is it when we are psychologically?
Oh, conflict can be healthy, but psychological safety feels like health and authenticity without repercussion.
Right. That's right. That's right. So
yeah, I agree. I think conflict sparks conversations. It gets people talking. Right. And even if it's different groups. So that's one of the things about conflicts that I don't shy away from.
Okay. Anybody else? Public speaking makes me introspect. I heard that in my breakout group too. Right. Sometimes we don't like Olaf. Yes. We want to pay attention to what we don't like. That's a part nobody wants to go into, right?
When you said psychological safety, I thought that maybe means when you do come upon conflict, that your brain retrieves automatically. And, if you're that kind of person that doesn't, I mean, nobody likes conflicts, of course, but if it's an extra, I want to say fragile person type of a deal, that your brain plays tricks on you, that instantly you start saying, instead of challenging the conflict, saying, oh, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay, it's not that bad, whatever, just as long as I get through and then I'm done. Not really attacking I mean, not attacking, that's an aggressive word, not constructively approaching the essence of the conflict or whatever, conflict at all.
That's where we're going tonight. Tom, you nailed it. You get the gold star tonight.
Yeah.
Going into like, what does it mean? What is conflict? What does it do to us? What's going on in the brain? And I want to go past this, just this kind of like, for me, it's like kind of drives me nuts a little bit. There's a superficial thing when we say, hey, psychological safety means I can take a risk, per Amy Edmondson, right? What does it mean to take a risk? What does it mean? How are we affected? How does our system, meaning the body, get affected? And we in a way, we're kind of like talking about these terms, and we're working with these people on these development teams, everybody like across the organization. We run into conflict all the time, but how do we deal with it? What are we evoking in people when we say something that's threatening to them? How are they responding? What is their embodied response? So that's kind of what we're going to diving into and look at the underpinnings. So of what does that mean? What are we working with? And begin to have a little bit more of a vocabulary so we can be a little bit more nuanced. We have a little bit more something to work with when we are. So what I want to be able today is take you through this. There's a lot of information to give you some tools on how to approach, like we talk about psychological safety, but like when you're in an argument, how do you deal with that? What are you doing? How do you address somebody who's coming at you? They're mad. They have a dependency, or they have something your team or you did that they didn't like. How do we relate to that? How do we deal with that in a safe manner? Okay, so that we're going to answer that, and hopefully we'll give you some tools to walk away with too. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen and we'll get into the prezzo. And here, everybody should see my screen now. Come on. All right. Everybody see my screen? All good?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So who I am. My name is Win. Can't lose with a name like that. You want them in your team. I've done a bunch of stuff. I'm definitely, I would safe to say, I'm definitely some form of an autodidact. I do teach myself some things, and definitely a jack of all trades, master of none. But it's fun having breath, isn't it? You know, for those who know what I'm talking about. For me, you know, my journey started with Chris. This is why it's such a blessing to come back and talk in this space. It started with Chris. I was a Scrum Master for years. And then I was thrust into program management, and through a number of working back, and I came from the startup world, even though Chris taught us when I was at Dolby, I was there for 12 years. But you know, I learned very quickly in startup situations, and everything since then has been a crazy skyrocket. You see all those activities that actually it's actually integrated into this talk in some way, believe it or not. It's all part of this embodiment. How does this system, this machine, this thing that is flesh and bone, how does that respond? When we get challenged? That's what I've always been interested in, and still continually to this day. Okay. And as always, you know, there's my info there. You can find me on LinkedIn and stuff like that. We can do that later. And just jump in if you have a question or something I can clarify for you. Okay. And right now I'm an expert Agile coach. Some of my peers are here. Welcome, guys. You know, and they can attest, like we kind of try to work with some of this too. They've seen me try to apply some of this knowledge in a practical situation. Okay, here we go. So what conflicts are you currently experiencing? What's a typical conflict that you run into now? Just shout it out, put it in the chat. Either way is fine.
Well, different opinions.
Different opinions. Somebody holds a stance, right? Well, what else? What else? Give me a couple more.
Not following through on commitments.
Not following. Hey, you promised me something and you reneged on it, right? Now I'm mad at you. And notice how that arises in the body. what do you feel? What does it evoke in the body? But classically, throw it out there. How does it, what's going, notice now, it's like the prompt,
Heartbeat.
how does it make you feel? And what is it going on here?
Cortisol,
Cortisol, but in the form of what? How do you come across the cortisol?
stress, anxiety.
Okay, how does the anxiety appear?
Heartbeat, hot flashes, like
Okay, hot flashes, heartbeat, those kinds of things. Stress, tension, tightness. You rise up,
stomach cramp or something.
stomach cramp, butterfly.
While you're smiling, yeah, no
Right.
problem.
All right, so that's what we're going to talk about. So we're currently living at a really exciting time in history. fMRI and all these CT scans, like we can stick people into machines that will measure blood flow and look at the brain patterns that happen. You know, there's lots and lots of research on how we respond under stress and how the brain works. So Betty and I were kind of talking earlier, we live at almost like a golden age in a way, right? We have access to all this research and new ways of thinking. So a lot of this is founded on a lot of the fMRI research that has been done recently. A lot of this material probably is based on, actually I based this whole talk on a series of books and some coursework that I've done. And also I've been practicing, you can argue we all practice this, right? But the thing is that I'm trying to weave a little bit of a narrative around how conflict arises in us, how it arises in our nervous system, and how can we respond to that. Okay, so the first key book is this one by Stephen Porges. He came up with this, I forget, was he at Case Western? I forget. But he came up with this thing called polyvagal theory. So normally in the classic way, we think of our brain as, some of you are familiar with this, the triune brain. You say, hey, there's a fight, flight response, and that's my reptilian brain responding in a particular way, and it's all head down. But actually, his research is finding it's not true, that a lot of our responses are bottom up. It is through the nervous system up into the brain. And a lot of it comes with the vagus nerve. It's basically this large nerve, you can see it in this image there, that stretches all the way down. It's actually connected to the enteric system. It's connected to your stomach. And it reaches up, and a lot of our signals are bottom up. So notice, like when you touch a hot stove, you don't think about, hey, that stove's hot, I better remove my hand. No, it's like, boom, it removes it really fast. So there's three parts, so it's polyvagal because there's three nerves. So first of all, it's the ventral vagal, the dorsal vagal, and the sympathetic nervous system. I'll go to each one in detail. The dorsal vagal is the oldest one in our system. So in a way, Porges thinks of this as there's some sort of evolutionary biology involved in this. Do you want to say it's a lizard brain? I don't know if I necessarily want to articulate it this way, but the simplest way to think of it is back when we were, coming from evolution, the fastest way, if you're in stress, if you're in a situation where there's something to come to eat you, the easiest way to deal with it is just to simply shut down. Just, not even run away. I'm just gonna go quiet. In the US, we call that, what do we call that picture right there, right? Anybody? We play possum. We fake it. Or in a sense, you see like just the whole system just goes quiet and goes asleep. It doesn't cost anything. Energetically, you shut down. It's kind of like, you ever watch some of those YouTube videos of these, there's a particular breed of goat that when it gets scared, it stiffens up and it falls over. It's really cute, right? I know Caesar knows what I'm talking about, right? So that's the dorsal vagal system. The second system is, as we evolve, we begin to learn how to fight. We begin to be more mobile, and the sympathetic nervous system shows up, because now we can say, hey, this is too dangerous. We're going to run away from it. Or, hey, you know what? I'm going to fight it, right? But it's this particular mode of operation is energy intense. Separate, right? Because now I'm going to have to suddenly raise my cortisol level, raise my adrenaline levels, and then start sprinting or start fighting back, right? Biting back, I think something like that. And lastly, the ventral vagal. This is the most recent one, according to the theory that was developed. This is in a way, it acts as a brake on the other nervous systems, because this is what allows us to sleep. This allows us to go into restoration, recuperation, those kinds of things. So this is an important, this is like the healthy part of how we might respond to something. Now, it's not to say that we favor one or the other, right? If your loved one is in front of a car and they're about to step into traffic, hey, you need the sympathetic nervous system to step in, push them, get them out of traffic, get them out of danger. You need the dorsal vagal to rest, right? To sleep. Or sometimes that's the right response. This can help with that, right? And this ventral vagal system regulates that. So a lot of times there's this idea of self-regulation. So Daniel Siegel, which I'll talk about later, came up with this idea of a window of tolerance, that we can't be overly stressed. Otherwise, we're going to hyperarousal. We're going to fight, flight our way back. Or the other way to respond is to simply shut down, which is hypoarousal. And this, in a way, these three levels, we can climb up and down like a ladder, right? So, and when I see my friend Lena is on here, so like when we talk about sports, hey, when I'm a skier, right? So when I get scared, scaring can be fun, but I can deal with it in a way where I can be aroused, but it's still in my window of tolerance. And notice how that it is all relative to the person. Some people can tolerate more, some people can tolerate less. They have a wider or a narrower window of tolerance. Now, let me ask this question. What happens if you don't sleep enough? What happens to your window of tolerance? What happens when you're hungry? It narrows, right? Hangry, getting hangry, your window of tolerance narrows, right? And then, but at the same time, think about also like, what if you're doing something and it's so boring? What happens? Right? You drop into hypoarousal. I'm not challenged. So what you use to respond to a situation and get you out of danger could also be how you thrive as well, right? You can see this as what is it? There's another model that does the same thing, where it shows like this range, where this healthy range of challenge, overstimulation, understimulation, basically. Okay. So that's self-regulation. If you go overregulate, you go one way or another. So when you're standing in a stand-up and somebody who doesn't want to be there and you call up on them, and what do they do typically? Anybody, any answers?
They say, can you repeat that?
They can repeat that, or what did they do? They don't do anything.
They don't respond.
They don't respond. So what do you think is happening there? So
one-word answers.
They go into hyperarousal. They're just like, I don't want to, don't call me, don't, right? Because it's not safe for them. So that's how they might respond. Then there's this idea of co-regulation. Who here likes retrospectives? What happens in a retrospective, right? Everybody here should be raising your hand. You should be all liking retrospectives. And what happens is in it that we are literally regulating our own systems together as people. This is why some people say, like, I work better when the camera's on, because I see them. I see even I've seen some trainers say that, right? I need to have people's cameras on, because in a way they can be using that to regulate the students, and the students regulating them. It goes both directions, right? So then there's this thing of mood contagion. Like, we know this is mirror neurons. There's some research in this where monkeys were accidentally watching, they had wired a monkey up. I forget what kind of monkey it was. They had wired up a monkey with all the to receive the brain telemetry, and the technician dropped something or made some sort of mistake, and he got frustrated, he got angry, and they saw that the monkey registered that. Right? So that we, in a way, the way Dan Siegel talks about is that our nervous system does not end at our fingertips. It actually can potentially reach into the next person. Hence, he coined the term interpersonal neurobiology, right? That as I'm speaking, I could be used, like for instance, one of the things that Stephen Porges, the founder of Polyvagal, talks about is like, if I talk at a monotone, sometimes it can get really agitating for people. Versus if I'm more sing-song, hey, can you hear my voice coming up and down? It tends to relax people. And he talks about something called vagal tone. There's that aspect of it. And then lastly, why does Agile work? There's the distributed cognition. We're able to share, we're able to hive mind with each other, share thoughts, be able to relax, be able to let go of certain things where somebody else can keep up. We can challenge each other and we can co-regulate. That's an important phrase. So when we're doing, that's why for me, retrospectives are so critical. How many of you heard, like, I remember Chris, when Chris was first teaching us this, he would say like, how many of you heard, hey, Agile games are a way to heal teams, heal the strife within a team. Anybody experience that? Right? That's why we play games, because games does that level of co-regulation to go through whatever strife we experience. All right, the opposite now is to go into dysregulation, right? We get overwhelmed, we go into hyperarousal, we go into hypoarousal. And this is because in a way, I think it was Tom that was saying, it's sort of like, there's a stance somebody takes, and this comes in the form of emotional armoring. These are kind of like survival strategies over time. So think of it as a kid, like that whole metaphor, that whole idea of like, it's not a metaphor, like sticking your hand on the stove. If the stove is hot, you got burned once. What's gonna happen the next time you see a hot stove? You begin to create this conditioning, like, hey, I better be careful around that stove.
You're going to put your brother's hand on it, not yours.
Right? Or
I'm so glad I wasn't the only person thinking that.
Exactly. Or your brother, in a way, like sort of like, we see this in terms of like adult development. I want attention from parent. What do I do to get it? I create armoring so I can get love, so that I can get a response, so I can get acknowledged, so I can feel seen and heard. And notice how that weaves into our day-to-day, but we don't acknowledge it by saying things like psychological safety, right? That's there. Some of you know my friend Volker Frank, who's I would consider an expert at systemic constellations, and how he says every day is take your family to work day. Because especially for leaders, right? Because leaders will set up organizational teams that potentially match their parental experience, the upbringing, because that's what they're used to.
Wow.
Notice how that might affect, if you're familiar with team topologies and things like that, how that might affect the organization. All right, so yes, so Darby, you said, I always thought about putting more emotional armor on before a potential conflict. Exactly, because it protects you. It's not necessarily bad, right? It protects you from danger. There's a value to it. So when we talk about that, we have to understand, Agilists, I implore you, we have to understand, be comfortable with the big T word, with the trauma. And there's various types, right? There's complex trauma. That's the part that we most familiar with, or at least we almost pathologize it. Hey, Agile coaches, don't deal with trauma. That's kind of what you were talking about, because that part is like related to, this is where the way I say it, when I coach somebody now, it's sort of like, my job is not to heal mental illness. That's not my training, right? But I can deal with simple trauma. I have to learn some skills with it. I have to learn how to be trauma sensitive, to be able to work when somebody is going into dysregulation, to say, oh, okay, what's going on? How are you dysregulating? Because if we're not careful, we can also reinforce their trauma. That's the danger that everybody is really afraid of, right? So as Agile coaches and Scrum Masters, at most, we only deal with simple trauma. These are things like work experiences. Here we go again. We're gonna go into another swirl or a holding pattern, or I'm not gonna get my dependency met. Those are simple things, right? So just to make that nuance distinction there for you all. So how do we work? So before I ask this question, any questions right now? Is so far is a bit. Everybody good? Makes sense, right? So that's the problem. So how do we work with that, right? How do we work through the defensiveness, the disagreement, and so forth? This is super powerful book. So typically when this is Richard Boyasis, he's definitely out of Case Western. What he found was that basically, again, also through fMRI research, that there's something called what he coined as positive and negative emotional attractors. The positive ones are the more restorative. It's the brainstorming. You know, there's a. And let me describe it first, and then I'll do a pop quiz. Okay. So the positive emotional trackers are what brings us together. We co-create, we co-regulate in that way. We dream up ideas, right? And then in a way, it helps us, we begin to regulate each other, okay? Negative emotional tractors are ones where we need those to be analytical. We need those to actually get things done, to do execution. And the idea here is that with positive emotional tractors, our awareness opens up. We're able to sense that we're being more present. We can be more restorative. It also leans into the area of daydreaming and brainstorming. And the negative emotional attractors are task focused. So now the thing is, I know he's using the words positive and negative, but the point here is that we need both, because if you didn't have a negative emotional attractor, you couldn't get anything done. But you do need the positive emotional attractor, because if you're too much in the negative, what happens when you overanalyze? Anybody? Right?
You go ballistic.
Go ballistic, you get into analysis paralysis, right?
Most of the time, you're ending up worse when from the very get-go that you were trying to make a simple decision, and then you don't even know, why am I debating this? Why am I even have to make that decision or whatever?
Exactly, right. Suddenly you're wound up in this thing, and you wind yourself up around the axle. But so here's the pop quiz. Notice that when we do retrospectives and we choose the retrospective game, begin to notice which side of the fence does the game fall on. So like, for instance, everybody knows, like, writing a postcard from the future, you know, that retrospective game? Anybody know that one? Which side does that fall on?
Positive.
Positive, correct. Why?
Because everything's gonna be just fine. Don't worry. Go forward, and then you'll see it's not a bow.
It's not a
Restorative
right. It's
and
restorative.
purpose-driven.
You're dreaming a better future together. What it might be. Not always, right? You could dream of a nightmare. Sure, that's possible. Okay, so let me flip it on the other side. Here's a classic example. What about 5 whys? Everybody know 5 whys, right? Which side does 5 whys fall on?
Negative.
Negative. And why? Have you noticed why 5 whys is difficult to apply?
Analytical, task-oriented, defensive.
Now you know why. Does this resonate? What I just said, right?
What is 5 whys?
Hard to apply. 5 whys is asking anybody if there's a problem, trying to get to the root cause by asking why 5 times.
Oh, so you're asking the same question?
Yeah.
You're hoping for a different answer?
My team couldn't meet the dependency. Why couldn't you meet the dependency? Oh, because the environment was down. Why was the environment down? Oh, the environment down. We don't have quality.
Yeah.
Why don't we have
Okay.
quality?
So that's like my kids. Why not? Then at the end, I don't have an answer. I say, well, because on Mars they do it that way, and that's it. I have.
Right.
We go to.
Notice, so now again, going back to the question in the beginning, notice how that makes you feel. And there's a part that I went over too quickly. Notice here on this particular slide, when somebody is dysregulated and hypoarousal, what happens when somebody does this, like that guy? What do you think he's going through?
Oh,
Sad.
bad.
Sad? Yeah. What happens to his body?
Might get sick.
Hypo.
It's hypo, right? But look at his physical body. Like, don't look at it.
Broken.
He feels broken. What else? Tell me more.
He's shutting down.
Shutting down. Okay. He's hunched over. He's closing up. It's almost like he's closing up and protecting his belly.
Yeah.
Right? Now, let me ask you the question is, what if he did that for 10 years straight?
That's who he could become. The non-solver, busted, broken,
Right.
whatever it is.
So what happens?
Probably have a heart attack.
Right. This gets entrained and it can become part of your body.
Yeah.
Stress can shape you. As my body worker says, muscle is stronger than bone. Right?
Oh,
And
boy.
then, please.
Would you say you need balance though? You can't be always positive. It has to look for the 5 whys as well. There needs to be balance in that bit, but understanding the balance is important.
Correct. And when you say it's balance, it's co-regulation and self-regulation. That's the balance that we're looking at, right? So what happens is this, when you're dysregulated for so long, your whole worldview can get stuck in that world. You're stuck in that place where everything is negative. Some would call that depression in some form, right? And to be aware of that, because literally, like one particular coaching modality I practice is called leadership embodiment, where we say, hey, stand, everybody here, take a moment, take a deep breath, sit up tall, feel your length, maybe even put your hand above your head like this, just feel the space, just sit up tall, take a deep breath, allow yourself to feel tall. How does that feel?
Great.
Why? What else? What else? It's great. What else?
Empowering. Awake.
Right? Because
Opens
that opens you up. So that Wendy Palmer talks about it is who's an Aikido teacher who recently passed away. Your length, close, Joe. Your length is your dignity. Because to be undignified is to crunch up like this guy, right? So when you start to feel your length, you start to feel your verticality, and it's like, hey, it's embodied here. Imagine if we just carried it around, carry ourselves around in that way. And then when we start to talk about that, we're talking about something called somatic coaching, and coach the body from the body first rather than the mind, cognitive, somatic versus cognitive. Okay.
Could you be the other way, the irrationally positive to the point?
It can be, but rational means to go from the head down. Somatic means to go body up. So from the nervous system up into the brain, right? And there's an openness that can occur.
Yeah.
Very different way of thinking. Okay, so that's one night. Now, going back to emotional, armoring, this is a fantastic book. As a coach, when I found this book, wow, completely transformed. I'm just gonna do a mention of this. This is that basically there's a lot of like fixations because people don't get what they want. And this book is really powerful in describing the 5 typical survival patterns. Leaving, it's not safe to be here. I'm gonna check out. And so tell me if you've ever seen this before. It's not safe for me to be here. So I'm just going to go quiet in my mind. I'm not physically here in my body. I'm not present in my body. It's just my body's here, but my mind is somewhere else. Okay. Merging is where I need to appease. I need to be accepted. I need to be loved. So I need to say and do everything so I can be part of what's going on and not be left behind. Enduring is a case where I can't get what I want. So we're just, everybody loses. Very Pyrrhic, right? And aggressive, I don't get what I want. So obviously that's the one probably everybody's familiar with. We're going to fight our way through it, right? And then rigid is one where, hey, this one everybody should be familiar. Actually, I have a word in my head that I'm thinking of that's related to this. When somebody says that, hey, that's scrum butt. You think that's rigid? Right? That's totally rigid because it doesn't follow the rules. It doesn't follow our particular ideal that they're fixated on. So it's to be aware of these things, right? To be cognizant of these particular patterns. Now, the idea here is that You don't have to be attached or fixated on any of these particular. The idea is to be able to graduate through this so that you can be self-led. You're not hung up on any of these things. And last, I think this is the last big important book, is something called Internal Family Systems, that's gaining more and more popularity. Anybody recognize that movie? Tell me. I know Season knows. Somebody else.
So good.
What movie is that?
Inside Out.
Inside Out. And so
One of
you're
the best movies ever.
right. So you're looking at the characters. I think it was fear, anger, joy, sadness, and disgust. I think I have that right? And imagine here, so in the pace, as Richard Schwartz says, we have pathologized this idea that we have multiple identities, we have multiple parts. We think of it as, hey, you're schizophrenic, No, the idea is that, let me ask you, how many of you are Scrum Masters? How many of you are coaches? How many of you are children of somebody's parent? How many of you are parents yourselves? How many of you are husbands and wives and lovers of other people? How many of you have multiple identities? Everybody should be saying yes, we do. Because each one has a particular thing that it loves, it has a particular fixation, it has a particular passion. And they're all important. They all play, they're part of the rich tapestry of who we are. Now, the challenge is when we go into dysregulation. Anybody experience when somebody gets triggered, or when one of you gets triggered? What happens?
Oh boy, shouldn't say shit show.
Shit show, right.
Well, when somebody gets triggered, they can't focus on the present. They're like stuck in the past.
Stuck in the past, exactly. Trauma is if the trauma is present now as it was then, is real now as it was then. And the way you break trauma is actually coming into the present and experiencing whatever that trauma is from the present. That's how you do that. So in IFS, Internal Family Systems, they talk about parts that basically there's 3 types. There's an exile part, the part that got hurt. Oh, I wanted love, I wasn't met. Oh, I don't want to ever feel that again. So I'm going to compartmentalize that. I'm going to shut it out. I'm going to take that part of me, I'm going to hide it away where nobody can be seen it again. I got so hurt and I don't want to ever feel that again. With that, there's another variety of parts. 2 parts are that respond to that exile part. One is the managers. The managers keep that part from ever being seen or heard. And like, hey, that was dangerous when that happened. Let's make sure that doesn't occur. And then lastly, the firefighter, because the thing is, what happens is, anybody ever get triggered from boiling over? You can't contain what's going on, and it leaks out in some way. And when the exile part leaks out, the firefighter steps in and says, hey, red alert, that part got out. We got to stop it. Right? We got to stop ourselves from looking stupid. Stop it. Like, we're nervous. No, stop it. Stop it. And then next, notice how it gets worse and worse. What happens when you're overreacting? Which part is that? Right? Making sense, right? You've seen this before, I assume. This being human is seeing this. Okay. So what our goal is to basically have these parts. It's not to say that, as the book says, there's no bad parts. They all serve a purpose. The problem is when they're out of balance, though, when they're overriding you, you're blended with them. I'm so triggered that all I can feel is the anger. So that's where in our English language, it's like, where did I go? I lost my mind. Things like that. I wasn't here. Because there's some truth in that. Some other part took over. And so what we want to do is define the wisdom innate in us in a way that we can be self-led, where we, as in a team, we have our team, our parts are here, and everybody's working in synchrony. My internal Scrum Master is doing his bit, my internal dev is doing his bit, my internal QA, my PO, so on and so forth. And we're working together in a very fluid way. Makes sense, right? Do you want this in a Scrum team? Hell yeah. So you can even extrapolate that into a dev team, into a scrum team, or even a whole organization. How many have seen parts in an organization? So I know, who was it? There was somebody in my group that was running a PMO. What does it mean for, so let me ask you this question. Have you ever seen one of these in an organization? I see a lot of nodding heads. Tell me, talk to me, talk to me. Why? What did you see that was one of these things in an organization?
Well, people who were frequently denied and shut down in a way of like, well, not the best solution, or yeah, not quite there yet. They stopped offering. They stopped. I think that was exiled. They just kind of thought to themselves, well, maybe I shouldn't be suggesting, or maybe I don't have the right knowledge for the solutions or suggestions or whatever. So yeah, I'm that guy who never, and then you realize when you open, a positive conversation up, you realize that they're gems. They're just not aggressive, or they're just not, whoever's louder sometimes. Yeah.
So Tom, I'm going to come back to that. Okay. So,
Okay.
so somebody else.
I think when it takes a lot of work to change, and I think that in all these situations, it's much easier for us to fall back to the way that we're more comfortable with than to have an opportunity to stop and really think before we act.
Yeah. Let me throw a phrase for there, JJ, the yes and what you just said. This is how we've always done it.
Yeah, people don't want to change because they've got past trauma. So that's what you're talking to. You're talking to their past trauma. You're not talking to them right now.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So how does, in an organization, so I want you to pay very close attention to this. How has that past trauma getting codified into the organizational's beingness? I'm not talking about the individuals, but into the organization's beingness. Think about this. How has it gotten codified before that you have seen? Anybody?
It's the way they manage people and manage the organization in terms of trust levels and things like that.
Mm-hmm. You can think of a very easy three-letter acronym.
CYA.
CYA. Governance. Rules and regulations.
Schools do this with kids all the time, right? You have these things that we're going to stop. We're not going to let this happen. And then when it does, we've got this punishment that we're going to do to.
Yeah, then the fear kicks in. But somehow at times, see, the danger with these parts is how many have been into an organization and worked on something, and there's a rule written somewhere, and we forgot why we wrote that rule. Right? And similarly, that happens to us as people, because what happens over time is, as these parts exist and we've shut them out for so long, what happens? We forget. We forget to completely, we've shuttered away a whole part of us, and we've completely abandoned it and forgotten how, but yet it leaks out.
When I think you bring up a really good point in the terms of, what comes to my mind are working agreements. When we actually sit down at the table and have a conversation with everyone and say, do we agree that this is how we would like to approach conflict and things that happen within our teams and group, and we're in a place where we're safe and we're comfortable. But as you share, when work gets going, we quickly forget those agreements, and how often do we actually come back to them?
Oh, great. Beautiful nuance. Yeah. In the midst of battle, we forget the working agreement we set up.
No.
And then we have to have the scrum master, the agilist, to remind our peers to remind us, hey, we agreed to that. You're stepping out of line. Is that what you want? You're breaking our agreement. And think about how trust plays into this. Like I remember Pat Reed telling me how trust is so critical, and once it's broken, trust is either not created or broken. And if it's broken, forget about it. It's too much trouble in a corporation to bring it back, right? So notice how when we talk about the words psychological safety, we are swimming in this soup. Every day we go into work, we're swimming in this all the time, both good and bad, right? And how this might be able to give us some language to be able to deal with that, to approach it in a safe way. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. Time check. How much time do I have left, guys?
You're good. You're rolling, right? So roll with it.
Okay, all right. So how do I deal with conflict? Somebody's coming at me. How do I begin to deal with this? This is beyond somebody like, let's say I'm having an argument with JJ. JJ doesn't like my stance. I don't like his either. Right? You get tight, so obviously breathe. Everybody take a deep breath right now. Breathe. And in a way, even like exhale and see if you can even like kind of tickle your vagus nerve, like deep breathe, exhale from the diaphragm. Do that a few times. See, that might help you. Porges, or actually Peter Levine, who does a lot of he created somatic experiencing to deal with to help people learn how to deal with trauma. Even wants people to go like you make a low sound so it vibrates. It literally vibrates the vagus nerve and getting it to relax in that way. So 5 steps to dealing with somebody who's completely dysregulated. Now it's not foolproof, but this will, like we talk about, we teach you guys how to do Scrum and this and all these things and Agile, but we never tell you how to deal with conflict. So here's a little bit of a crash course. First thing is to recognize, the thing is all parts, no matter what they all want to feel seen and heard. Who here wants to feel seen and heard? Everybody should be raising their hand, right? So you want to feel seen and heard, and these parts within us, they serve a purpose, and they want to be recognized for what they do as well. They want to be seen and heard. So the things you can ask is, and we might even pick I might even pick a volunteer here. Maybe some go through something you're challenging, and just kind of walk through the script a little bit. Okay, so you can ask them, what's your concern? What are you afraid might happen? Why is that important to you? What the upset? Why is that upset important? Recognize it, acknowledge it.
Hey, I just want to ask about this. I mean, I recognize the part for that, but there's almost a need to mirror back, I think, kind of what they're feeling. I can see you're frustrated. I can see that you're upset.
Beautiful. You're ahead of the game. Right.
And even before you get to the point about asking, like, what's your concern? Where are you at? Just recognizing their experience.
That's right. And notice here, I didn't put this in my slide. Notice here, remember, we love to say the word, you got to put on your oxygen mask before you put on somebody else's in an emergency. So that is still true here, right? Because to do what Don just said, I think it was Don, to do what he just said, requires for you to be not dysregulated yourself, right? So do your breathing, take your step back, kind of extricate yourself from that situation, or even recognize the part that's within you to honor its burden. There's a part of me here, I'm feeling really uptight and really upset. I see, hey, what's my concern? What am I worried might happen? Okay. Second step, honor it. Yeah, how hard are you working at that? How much energy did you put into this? I see you're really upset. How, what's the cost to you? Honor that. Yeah, I see this is really important to you, right? I see it's been difficult. How difficult? Oh, really difficult. Okay. Step 3, begin to ask, what is it you would rather be doing? What do you need? What do you want out of this? And notice how in this language, we begin to remove ourselves a little bit from the crisis. We're removing ourselves from conflict, and we're really activating our listening levels here. I mean, we don't, if you guys ever talk about coaching skills, listening, the 3 levels of listening, and we're beginning to sense into other, we begin to do the global listening. What do you need help with? Step 4, unburden this, right? Give them time to speak, let them feel heard. How can I help you? Oh yeah, that sucks. Okay, what is it that you're worried about that what can I do to alleviate it for you? And then lastly, then ideally we're all agilists. We want, and these 5 steps are my interpretation of Schwartz's work, right? We co-create, we're all agilists. We love to co-create. It's like, okay, can we do that together? Right. So, and this comes naturally. Once you're at this state, things have been relaxed in a way. You've recognized what it is. You've honored what you've honored the battle that they were trying to fight. You can be in full disagreement with them, but you can still hold that honor for them. Like, yeah, I disagree with you, but I see why that's important to you. Make sense? So that's really the talk for tonight. But I kind of want to go through a little bit of a demo if anybody's willing, right? It's like, what's the position you heard? Or you can think on behalf of somebody else that you're struggling with. And I think it's probably better if we do it as a demo in front of people. Is there anybody that's willing to give it a whirl? Maybe somebody you have a challenge with, or something that you're challenged with yourself that you're willing to demo. Just to go through the script in a very light way.
I don't mind participating, but I'm trying to think of something right now.
Okay, all right. So what was your last frustration, JJ?
It was my last contract.
It was your last contract. Okay, very good.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to stop my share just to kind of focus on JJ a little bit. So can we spotlight JJ, please? Or actually, I can do it myself too. Perfect. All right, JJ. Good seeing you again. Okay, so what happened in your last contract? What happened?
It was a coaching engagement, and I was asked to work with a new business group that was transitioning, moving from programs and projects to more of a product approach. And I was brought in with a team of coaches, but we were each working on different engagements.
Okay. So I'm going to interrupt you here just so that we can get through the story. We don't need much story, but what was your frustration with that situation?
Yeah, the frustration is that I didn't even have an opportunity to work with leaders to begin their transformational journey.
Right, you weren't even given a chance.
Yeah, I wasn't able to get a true engagement with them.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna follow the script, right? So and why was that important that you needed to, why was it important to you to get that started that you weren't allowed to do?
Well, I was brought on to do just that. At least that was the understanding from our leadership team, the coaching engagement. Okay. And but there were a lot of things behind the scene that weren't really shared with the business leadership. So I was it was almost like I was being set up to fail.
Right, you were set up to fail. All right. And so that was what you were worried about, and it kind of manifested in that way, right?
Yeah.
And how hard were you working at it? So remember the second step is, how hard were you working at trying to get that recognition?
Well, over years of my journey in going through this, I think I had some experience to realize that I could not push my way through this, obviously. So there was some, cognitive thinking but I was having a little bit of a tug of war with myself, saying, okay, I'm not going to be pushing this. They need to, feel when it's right for us to have these discussions, but yet I'm trying to engage them and say, these are things that I feel, would help as we kind of learn what it is that you're wanting to do.
I'm going to politely interrupt you here, because guys, here, notice how there's a lot of story behind it. Notice that. That's a very important thing. And sometimes the story, if you get caught of it, it takes you away. So I'll go back to the question, JJ. How hard were you working at this, trying to get this recognition?
I don't think I was working as hard.
Uh-huh. Yeah. But why was it important to you? I mean, how important was it to you to get that recognition, to get off the ground?
Well, I wanted to be able to accomplish the goal of what I was going in there to do, to be able to help them with their transformation.
So now he's kind of answered into the third question, right? So what would you have rather what would you have rather done or be doing in that situation? Probably just executing on the thing, right?
Yeah, well, it would have been nice to be able to work with the business leaders to actually bring them through the beginning stages of it.
Yeah. So with that, it's in the past. We have, what's arising for you now? Now that you shared this.
Well, it was another really important learning for me, and it doesn't end there. Obviously, it tells me I need to continue on, try to understand where my expectations were, and maybe what I could do differently, of course, and take that, which I'm on to my next contract.
Right.
But sometimes it's understandable that the situation is just not a situation that you can control. Obviously, most of them aren't, but you're not able to change the outcome of it, regardless of what you're there to do.
It's out of your control. Yeah.
So those are things that I have to come to terms with personally and understand it, and not take that personally.
What's it like for you to share that with everyone here? Kind of like, what to reflect on that in that way.
Well, I don't know. I hope that maybe, that the folks here, when they hear that, it may trigger situations that they were in, or that they're going through, or that they understand and want to figure out how they would be able to manage that too. I'm pretty much an open book these days. I've learned over the years that holding back and not sharing does not help me learn or grow. So
yeah, okay. So there's this an opening to wanting to share, to want to other to learn. Was it helpful for you in a way to share that out? Does it, how do you feel differently after sharing a little bit of that?
It helps me because it helps me be true to myself and not pretend that I'm somebody I'm not. So, and having an audience and being able to be open and honest about it, it's not easy, but it does give me an opportunity to feel better. It kind of lifts certain things off my shoulders.
Yeah. So speak a little bit more. Like, what do you mean when there's an unburdening going on, right? Just a little bit more. I don't want to put
in what way?
Like you said, like there's a little bit of, like you're telling me there's a little bit of relief in some way to be able just to talk about it and get it off your chest in a way.
Yeah, I think another challenge is in today's environments we're remote. So we're not doing the face-to-face, which is hard for me. Doing videos is good, but the face-to-face is much better. So, it's better to be able to have those opportunities to work with people collaboratively and to get that same kind of feeling, I guess, or
Yeah, yeah. The co-regulation.
interaction and the responses. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I won't press you any further. Thank you, JJ, for volunteering.
Woohoo! Thank you, JJ. Give it up for JJ.
Let's give everybody a round of applause for JJ for being vulnerable in that way. Okay, so what did you all notice in that? Tell me.
I noticed when he stopped talking about the experience, his face lit up, his eyes, everything. He threw it off. He you know, whatever. Like he said, he had some audience, whatever. A little bit of unburden himself. He was like, yeah, and I can feel the pain from his eyes into mine because I had a couple of situations like him, and I needed to know why. Guess what? You don't need to know why. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's not you, or it's just the wrong, whatever, you know, just the wrong universe. It's just not wrong. It's just a specific universe that, you know, wasn't appreciating maybe, or wasn't allowing you to kind of wiggle in yourself the way you thought you will.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you're not
yeah.
bad for that. You're awesome, man. I see you. You're awesome. I mean,
So I want
face
to
reading.
point out something too. What you just said, Tom. Notice how there's some parts there too. Parts to recognize. Hey, it's okay. There's a part that comes
Exactly.
in for the rescue. They're not all bad. They're all helpful parts too.
I was nodding like I know him. I never saw him in my life, and I was looking in his eyes when he was talking, and I'm like, you know,
Because
like he knows me. He's telling something that I that I felt.
So we
I was going to
empathize
say
in
the same thing. There's a feeling of like, I know him and I
Yeah.
don't, you know, but I think we can recognize a feeling in someone else and know that we've had that feeling.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
the mirroring I was talking about earlier. Right? I mentioned in one of my slides. It evokes that same behaviors from us. It evokes the same memories. There's a notice how there's a relatedness of our parts. Though somebody else is suffering, we can share that suffering with them. Right? Cool. Awesome.
Awesome story. Yeah.
What else? What else? What else? Something different somebody noticed.
I noticed a shift at one point from I language to you language. And I wonder if you noticed that as a coach. It was an interesting shift, and I don't know quite how to read it, but I did notice it.
I'd say that's a very, I could always rely on you, Joe, to find out the very new. Yeah, notice that there's a shift there. There's a shift in way when we're holding that conversation, we're creating a holding for that person. Now, I know you guys have heard, I'm sure you've done like coaching conversations and powerful questions and stuff. Notice how I kind of use some of that language, but notice how I was kind of carrying myself. Noticing it wasn't about me. It's creating that space for JJ to be, and just sort of like, hey, JJ, yeah, you're going into story, buddy. I got to pull you back so you can just be with those feelings that you're experiencing.
Yep. I realized that little moment when you said a little bit more, JJ. I'm like, oh, he's, you know, like a little thread, like a little bit more.
Yeah, and notice that some people don't want that. Some people like, no, I don't.
No, you were very gentle. You were very, you know, for the purpose of.
And JJ's our friend. I can push on him a little bit.
Yep.
Well, all I noticed there were two JJs, honestly. One before when he was explaining the whole thing, and look at him now. For sure.
Any other comments from it? Thanks, Tom. And any other comments from anyone?
I felt, and I might be wrong, but I felt the language was very safe language to start off with, very protective of JJ himself in terms of, I'm going to describe this in terms of a safe way for me to describe it. And it felt, as the conversation went, it became, okay, we're in a safe space, as opposed to I'm creating a safe space for myself. And potentially that transition of, actually, I'm safe with you, so I can have you in that space to have that conversation. And that transition I felt was an interesting thing. Well, that was just my experience of it, but I just felt that initial bit was, oh, I'm in my safe space and you're outside of my safe space, and that's the way this conversation is going to go.
Right. And notice here, I'm not thinking about clean language. I'm not thinking about I'm just being here for him. However he wants to be. I could still be angry at him. Damn it, JJ. you know, but I can still hold those two positions at the same time. Right.
Just earlier when you said something about disagreeing is never, shouldn't be a conflict. That's never bad. Disagreeing is actually constructive. That's how we estimate. That's how we, hey, why is it I don't know, you know, why did you estimate this story so much higher than the other person? Please tell us. This is not like, oh, you shut up, you don't know what you're talking
That's
about,
right.
because it's all 5s and 1 8, you know. No.
So there's an aspect that I don't cover in this talk, but there's an aspect about holding a polarity, two opposing sides, to be both at the same time. And in essence, when we're evoking this, we're playing around with that. I can hold my position, but I can still be there for somebody else. And this is in a way, powerful way to coach. So the story I will share is that at my last job, I think Lena knows who I'm talking about. I had somebody come at me and say, like, you are telling us to do Agile in a completely different way. We spent a whole year doing it, and you're coming in and you're blowing this up. You're telling us we did it wrong. That with that tone. Was she dysregulated? Heck yeah. Right? Was she holding a stance? Was there a part? You heard it. I've been working this hard. She literally said it. I've been working this hard. We did this for a full year, and you're telling us differently. So I went through that protocol. I said, like, okay, what are you worried about might happen? I worry like I'm doing the wrong thing. I'm wasting my time. Or I'm worried about getting confused. My coaches keep telling me two different things. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I recognize that. I see where we're confusing to you. Then we say, like, how hard have you been working? Well, obviously she's been trying to adopt it for a full year. And then once he hears that, here's what I'm trying to do. And now you can begin to negotiate. It's like, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help us all get aligned and do the right things and remove impediments. Do you want that too? She's like, yeah. So immediately you can begin to feel the softening. There's a softening, there's a relaxation that occurs, right? And all without giving up any kind of stance. I never gave up my stance at all. I just listened to her. And I try to honor her burden, basically. Right? Powerful stuff. So I hope that was, I just have couple more slides and I'll do Q&A and stuff like that. I know I've been answering questions all along and welcoming to take any feedback. Okay, so those are the 5 steps. Recognize the burden, honor it, identify what their needs are, and then help them unburden and help them come up with a new solution, co-create it with them, okay? Again, remember things like if you get into analysis, you're begging for them to go into negative emotional attractor. You're begging them to go into fight flight. So when you unburden this way, you recognize it, the relaxation, you're helping them regulate. This is where you see some agilists are so great. They show up in the room and you feel better. They didn't even say a word because they're co-regulating everybody in the room. And here's a really big thing. A lot of people say, I can't coach, I can't scrum master unless the cameras are on. I can turn off my camera here. I can still do the sing-song game with my voice and regulate you all with my voice without you seeing me at all. And I can listen to the same tenor from you. Are you sing-song? Are you monotone? Are you not saying anything? Now, the anxiety appears when somebody is not interacting because you don't know where they are, right? And so there has to be a certain trust that it has to get developed, right? So yes, co-regulation is the name of the game. I would argue that Agile is all about co-regulation. Where we're talking about individuals and interactions, that's what's going on. Lastly, one additional book, if you really want to start about how the body, how this all works in, Amanda Blake's book is amazing. You know, and she ties it all together, how the nervous system, everything that I spoke about tonight. As an Agile coach, I would say you definitely want to check out 5 Personality Patterns, no Bad Parts, anything from Richard Schwartz. maybe helping people change. If you're a Scrum Master, you want to play, like helping people change is probably a great book for you. But for everybody, body is a brain. The body, your body is your brain is a generally great place to start. And that's the end of my talk. Yeah, any questions? I hope this was helpful to you and insightful. And did I deliver on my promise? Like, is this a different definition of psychological safety? Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What was that? The five, I'm sorry, the five
personality patterns?
Yeah, the
By
five personality.
Stephen
Okay.
Kessler.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? And it's so I got in a situation where I was so tired that my fight and flight switched on and didn't switch off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very dangerous thing because your brain stops doing high level functions and you get in a depressive mode. That's not the question. The question is, I found a technique and I don't know why it works, is if I find myself in that situation, I'm so tired, fight and flight kicks in, I just smile and that instantly stops it. Just that bit about just recognizing the fact, because the nature of my traveling, I'm always tired, and it's just that, I'm in this situation, and I just smile, and that smiling just instantly stops it. And I wonder if you've come across any studies.
Sure.
What's going on there?
Let's play with that. Everybody play with this together, okay? So take a deep breath. Stand tall, sit tall, stand tall, whatever you want. Just feel your verticality. Feel like there's an energy rising above your head, washing down the front of you. Just imagine that. Just go within imagine it. Now think of something that makes you smile. How does it make you feel? Pretty powerful, right? It's really what he was saying. Like, because there's a somatic, what you're doing, Michael, is you're going body first. There's a somatic shape, there's a somatic vocabulary associated with the smile. So by tapping into that, you're working body first, right? You're relaxed, because what you're describing is, to me, I interpret it as, you didn't eat enough, you didn't sleep enough, your window of tolerance is super narrow. What you need to do is go get a bite to eat, go take a nap. But if you can't do that, you can tap into other, so that's what somatic coaching is. Somatic coaching is, what's the somatic shape? Like the smile. And remembering, okay, so we just did that. You guys, like, you think of your cats, you're thinking of your children. I know Susan's thinking about her cats. So
how did you know?
I read your mind. So I'm in your head. So when you think of that, because I'm thinking of my cats too. So when you think of your cats, there's a somatic shape. Now, okay, so guys, so here's a little trick. Think about the happy thing. Notice in the body what that happiness shows up as. Okay. So is there a, when I coach people, I often ask, what's the color, what's the temperature, what's the shape, what's the texture?
Almost tingling.
It's tingling. So some people are going to say it's tingling. Some people will say it's like, ooh, this is cotton candy, something weird. There's some imagery. Go with it. Okay. So no, you don't have to tell us, but just say, notice what that feels like. Okay. Now put that feeling down. Put that feeling down. Go back to a neutral state. Now turn it back on and go back into this happy state. Move back. Put it on like you're putting on your favorite coat or your shirt or something like that. Makes you feel good, right? Now take
I'm surprised I can do that.
Right. Now,
just like that.
You can practice that. That's a somatic move. Just like Michael's talking about. He's forcing himself to smile. And in that, it shifts the nervous system.
I thought if it doesn't come spontaneously because you're in a bad space or something, no, you can just switch off, switch on.
Now it's not foolproof.
No, of course, but
because if you're beat down so much, it may not work, right? But notice how that can support you in strife.
Well, it's hard to beat me down so badly that when I think of my 3 little boys, that I wouldn't be like, you know what? It's almost to the point I have them and everything's going to be okay with everything else. So as long, you know what I mean? So it's almost like bulletproof, whatever.
So that's a quick and dirty taste of somatic coaching. to shift
Yeah.
from one shape to the next and back and forth and getting used, or even in the case of getting used to something uncomfortable, right? Oh God, here we go again. PI planning, this sucks, you know? Okay, I feel it.
It
Can I
does
feel
suck,
that?
yeah.
I smile. When I smile through it, can I be okay? I'm like,
So that's
okay,
nothing.
PI planning, you know, I'm present in my body. It's not gonna hurt me. Right? It's a really great, everybody knows that pain.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
Too
Thank you
soon,
for that
too
answer.
soon, right, Bob? Too soon. No.
Too soon.
All right. So great stuff. I hope that gave you some more insight, Michael, what's going on. Okay. Other questions for anybody? All right. So if that's it, then I guess we can go into breakout rooms, talk about anything else. But thank you all for being here, staying through it. I hope this is immensely helpful to you, to give you additional tools on how to deal with your situations that you're in. And I'd love to, if you run across from me or reach out on LinkedIn and you use those steps, let me know, right? Let me know.
Hey, thank you. Give it up. We win. Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow. What a great discussion tonight. A lot of food for thought.